For 3 weeks straight, my brother-in-law came into my house every single afternoon while I was at work. And my wife never mentioned it once. I want you to really sit with that for a second, because when I first realized it, I didn't understand what it meant either. It didn't feel like danger. It didn't even feel like suspicion. It felt like a small miscalculation, the kind you notice but don't act on right away. My name is Gerald Whitmore. I'm 63 years old. I spent over 3 decades as a structural engineer in Hamilton, Ontario. I built bridges. I spent my life calculating how much pressure something could take before it collapsed. But somehow, I never thought to apply that same logic to my own family. And that was my first mistake. My wife, Patricia, was 59 when this started. We'd been married 34 years. She was the kind of woman who saved every birthday card our kids ever gave her. She had this quiet way of caring about things deeply, but without making a show of it. So when she told me one night in late September that she'd been feeling off, dizzy, tired, not really hungry, I didn't panic. I told her it was probably stress. I remember exactly what I said. Just book a doctor's appointment when you get a chance. Then I kissed her on the forehead, grabbed my keys and headed out. At the time, it felt reasonable. Now, it feels like negligence. At first, it was subtle. She'd skip breakfast, say she just wasn't hungry. Then she started waking up in the middle of the night, heart racing. By mid-October, she'd lost about 6 pounds. That's when I took her to our family doctor. Blood work came back mostly normal, slightly low iron. Nothing alarming. The doctor recommended supplements and said we'd monitor it. So Patricia started taking them. And I told myself everything was under control. At first, I didn't think much of it. But then our daughter called. Renee is 31. She lives in Guelph. She calls her mum every Sunday like clockwork. But this time, she called me on a Tuesday afternoon. I was in the middle of a site meeting when I saw her name pop up. That alone was enough to make me step outside. Dad, she said, something's wrong with Mom. I asked her what she meant. She sounds, off, like she's not following the conversation. I asked her what she had for lunch and she couldn't remember. That stuck with me. Patricia forgetting something simple like that wasn't like her. I told Renee I'd keep an eye on it. Then I went right back into my meeting. When looking back, that moment feels heavier than it should, like a crack forming in a structure that I chose not to inspect. What I didn't know at that time, what I wouldn't find out for weeks, was that someone had already started walking through that crack, and it was someone I trusted. Patricia has one sibling, her younger brother, Clifford Marsh. He's 54. Charming, in a way that people are when they've never really had to answer for anything. Always smiling, always offering to help, rarely following through. We had a family cottage up on Georgian Bay. Beautiful place, worth around $800,000 at the time. Patricia inherited it about 11 years earlier. Clifford had been making comments about it ever since. Little things, jokes that didn't quite feel like jokes. Lucky you got the good one, Paddy. Stuff like that. I noticed it. I just didn't do anything with it. Because I was busy. Because it wasn't serious. Because family is supposed to be safe. That's what I told myself. Then, sometime in early October, Patricia mentioned the gutters needed cleaning before winter. I didn't have time. Work was heavy. Deadlines piling up. Clifford offered to take care of it and I said yes. That was the moment I opened the door. After that, he started coming by more often, first to check on the gutters, then a window seal, then just to see how Patricia was doing. She trusted him, of course she did. He was her little brother, and by then she wasn't feeling well enough to question anything. I came home early one Wednesday in mid-November. Had a headache that wouldn't quit, so I left work around 2:30. When I pulled into the driveway at 3:15, I saw Clifford's truck parked out front. And something shifted. Not fear, not yet. Just that quiet sense you get when something doesn't quite add up. Like a number in an equation that looks right, but isn't. I walked inside. Clifford was sitting at the kitchen table, sipping tea like he owned the place. Patricia was across from him, wrapped in a cardigan, even though the house was warm. She looked pale, tired, but calm. They were talking about nothing. Weather, I think. Maybe a TV show, completely normal. Clifford looked up, smiled. "Hey, Gerald, didn't expect you home this early." I said something about the headache. We talked for maybe 20 minutes, casual, easy. But I watched him the whole time. There was something about how comfortable he looked, like he'd been there 100 times before. Or maybe that should have been the moment I asked more questions, but I didn't. He left shortly after, gave Patricia a hug on his way out. I watched her face when he did. She looked fond, tired but fond. That's what made it harder to question. That night I asked her, "How often has Clifford been coming by?" She paused. "Just helping out," she said. "How often?" She frowned slightly, like she was trying to think through fog. "Once a week? Maybe more, I'm not sure." That uncertainty, that was the first real crack I couldn't ignore. I didn't argue, I didn't accuse anyone, I just nodded. But that's when something in me shifted from assumption to observation. Because I've spent my whole life relying on data, and suddenly I realized I didn't have any. So I decided to get some. That decision would end up changing everything. The next morning, I ordered a camera. I told myself it was for Patricia, that I needed to monitor her in case she fell, or got confused, or needed help when I wasn't there. And that was true. Just not the whole truth. Because somewhere in the back of my mind, there was another question forming, one I hadn't said out loud yet. Why was Clifford coming over so often? And why didn't my wife seem to fully remember it? At first, I didn't think much of it, but that question didn't go away. The camera arrived 2 days later. Small, discreet, designed to look like a smoke detector. I installed it in the living room on Friday evening while Patricia was napping in the bedroom. It connected to an app on my phone. Simple, clean, objective, data. That's what I needed. The first few days, nothing unusual happened. Clifford came by once, maybe twice, and he made tea, sat with Patricia, helped her with a crossword puzzle, talked about small things. If anything, it made me feel slightly embarrassed, like I had overreacted, like I had let suspicion creep in where it didn't belong. That's what I told myself. But something still felt off, because Patricia wasn't getting better. If anything, she was worse. She started forgetting small things more often, misplacing items, asking the same question twice in the same conversation, and every time I brought it up, she brushed it off. "I'm just tired, Gerald." That word again, tired. But this didn't feel like fatigue, this felt like something else. The following week, Clifford came by more frequently. Monday, Wednesday, then again on Thursday. Each visit lasted longer than the last, and every time Patricia seemed a little more distant afterward. Yeah, that's when something clicked for me. Not a full realization, just a pattern. And once you see a pattern, you can't unsee it. So on Thursday afternoon, during a site visit in Burlington, my phone buzzed. Motion detected. I remember exactly where I was, sitting in my truck, reviewing notes before heading into a meeting. I almost ignored it, because by then, notifications from the camera had become routine. But something made me open it, and what I saw... At first, I didn't understand. The angle only showed part of the kitchen from the living room camera. Clifford was standing near the cabinet where we kept medications and supplements. Patricia wasn't in frame. He looked toward the hallway, paused, like he was checking if anyone was coming. Then he reached into his jacket pocket. That's when something felt off. He pulled out a small container. Then I couldn't see exactly what it was, but I watched him open the cabinet, take out Patricia's iron supplement bottle, and then he tipped something into it, just a small amount. Quick, careful. Then he closed the bottle, placed it back exactly where it had been, and shut the cabinet. Like nothing had happened. I stared at my phone. For a full 10 seconds, my brain refused to process it. It kept trying to rewrite what I was seeing into something harmless. Maybe it was a vitamin. Maybe he was helping her. Maybe... No. I rewound the clip. Watched it again, then again. By the third time, my hands were shaking because there was no version of that moment that made sense. No normal explanation, no innocent interpretation, only one conclusion. And I wasn't ready to accept it. I want to tell you that I called the police immediately. That I acted quickly, decisively, that I did what any rational person would do, but I didn't. I sat there, in that truck, for 11 minutes, just staring at the screen. Because what I had just seen didn't fit into the world I thought I lived in. This was my wife's brother, a man who stood beside me at my wedding, a man who had been part of our lives for over 3 decades, and my brain kept rejecting the idea that he could be doing something like this. But deep down, I knew. I called Patricia first. I told her not to take any of her supplements until I got home. I made up an excuse. Something about wanting to double-check the dosage with her doctor. She didn't question it. She just said, okay, in that same soft, slightly distant voice that broke something in me. Then I called Renee. I told her everything. There was silence on the line. Long enough that I thought the call had dropped. Then she said, very quietly, Dad, you need to call the police. I swallowed. I want to get the bottle first, I said. I want proof. The video is proof. I'm still going home. Another pause. Then don't wait, she said. Please. I drove home in 38 minutes. It should have taken 50. I don't remember most of that drive. Just the feeling. Like everything was narrowing into a single point. I went straight to the kitchen, opened the cabinet, took the supplement bottle, put it in a plastic bag without touching anything else. My hands were steady by then. Too steady, like I had switched into work mode, procedure, control, but inside, everything was unraveling. I found Patricia in the den, asleep in her chair. She looked so small, smaller than I remembered. And I sat beside her, took her hand, and for a moment, I couldn't say anything. Then I leaned closer. I love you, I said quietly. Her eyes opened slowly, that same foggy expression. What's wrong? She asked. And I realized I didn't know how to explain any of this yet. So I just said to her, nothing. I'm here. But that wasn't true, because something had already started, something I couldn't stop anymore. And what I was about to uncover next was far worse than what I had just seen. The constable arrived within 40 minutes. I remember opening the front door and feeling like I was letting something irreversible into the house. Not danger. Danger was already inside. This was confirmation. She was calm, mid-30s, steady voice, the kind of presence that doesn't escalate a situation, but doesn't minimize it either. I showed her the footage without saying much. She watched it once, then again. Then she looked at me and said, well, where is the bottle? I handed it to her in the plastic bag. She sealed it, labeled it, and told me very clearly, do not contact your brother-in-law. Do not mention this to anyone outside your immediate family. We'll take it from here. That's when it became real. Up until that moment, there had still been a part of me hoping there was some explanation, some mistake. But the way she handled that bottle, there was no doubt anymore. Patricia was taken to the hospital that same evening. She didn't want to go. She said I was overreacting, that she was just tired, that she'd be fine after some rest. At first, I didn't push. Then I remembered the video, and something in my voice must have changed because she stopped arguing. Mon and Renee met us at Hamilton General. The three of us sat there together in a waiting room that felt too quiet for what was happening. No one said much. Because what do you say when you're waiting to find out if someone you love has been slowly poisoned? That's when everything started to come into focus. The tests didn't take long to raise concern. They found something in her system, not something you'd expect to see from an iron supplement, something introduced deliberately. I won't say the name of it, even now I can't, but I will tell you this. It wasn't something you stumble into, it was something you go looking for, and in small, consistent doses, or it causes neurological damage, slow, progressive, confusing enough to look like illness, subtle enough to avoid suspicion. That's when I realized this wasn't random. This was a plan. And what I found next changed everything. The police brought Clifford in that same night. I wasn't there. I didn't want to be, because I already knew what they were going to ask him, and I wasn't ready to hear the answers. Renee stayed with me in the waiting room. At one point, she looked at me and said, "How long has this been happening?" I didn't answer right away, because I didn't know. And that was the part that kept replaying in my head. How many days had I sat across from Patricia at dinner while this was happening? How many times had I noticed something was off and explained it away? That question didn't have an answer yet, but the investigation would give me one. Over the next few weeks, everything came out, piece by piece. Clifford was in debt, not normal debt, not the kind you fix with a payment plan or a second job. This was layered, structured, years of bad decisions stacking on top of each other. And worse, he owed money to people who don't wait patiently. That alone would have been enough to explain desperation. But not this. This was something else. Because he hadn't just been reacting, he had been preparing. The police found search history on his laptop, legal processes, property transfers, power of attorney, specifically how to gain control of assets from someone deemed mentally unfit. That's when it hit me. The cottage, our place on Georgian Bay, valued at around $840,000. It had always been Patricia's, and Clifford had always known that. Those little jokes over the years? So they weren't jokes, they were signals. I just never read them correctly. He had spoken to a lawyer twice, asking about scenarios where a family member could step in to manage assets if someone became cognitively impaired. He hadn't filed anything, not yet, but he was laying the groundwork. That's when the full picture finally came together. He wasn't trying to kill her, not quickly, not obviously. He was making her sick, slowly, carefully, enough that over time she would seem confused, incapable, dependent, and then manageable. That was the plan, and it would have worked. That's the part that still keeps me up at night. Because it was working. Patricia had been taking those supplements for 5 weeks. 5 weeks of gradual decline. 5 weeks of me noticing things and not connecting them. If I hadn't installed that camera, if I had ignored that one moment of discomfort, I don't know how far it would have gone.
And that thought, it doesn't leave you. The charges came shortly after. Administering a harmful substance, intent to cause bodily harm, fraud-related preparation. Clifford pleaded not guilty at first. Of course he did. But the evidence was there. The footage, the bottle, the toxicology report, the search history. There was no version of events that explained all of that away. And yet, even with all of it laid out so clearly, part of me still struggled to understand how we got there. Because this wasn't a stranger, this was family. And that's what made it harder, not easier. Patricia stayed in the hospital for 4 days. The doctors told us the damage was real, but not permanent. Her balance was affected, her memory, her focus, still clouded, but they expected improvement. Slow, gradual, like everything else in this story.
And as I sat there beside her bed that third night, watching her sleep, I realized something I hadn't wanted to admit before. The warning signs had been there, not just in her, in him. In the way he talked about money, in the way he hovered around the cottage, in the way he always offered help at just the right moment. I had seen all of it. I just never treated it like it mattered. Because it was family, because I trusted him. Because I thought trust meant not asking questions. That was my second mistake, and this one almost cost me everything. Clifford changed his plea 14 months later. Not right away. At first he held on to the story that it was all a misunderstanding, that he had been helping Patricia, that whatever was found in the bottle wasn't what it looked like. but evidence has a way of narrowing your options. Oh, and eventually, he ran out of room. He pleaded guilty in the spring. I sat in that courtroom beside Renee while the judge read through the details, clinical, detached, precise. Words like intent, harm, premeditation. Language I was used to hearing in engineering reports, but hearing it applied to my own family, it felt unreal. Clifford didn't look at us, not once. That was the part that stayed with me. Not anger, not shame, just absence. Like whatever had connected him to us had already been gone for a long time. The sentence came down not long after. I won't pretend it felt satisfying, because it didn't. There's a difference between justice and repair. One happens in a courtroom, the other doesn't. And there are some things you don't get to rebuild. That's the part no one really prepares you for. At first, I didn't think much about what came after. I was focused on Patricia, on getting her home, on watching for signs, improvement, setbacks, anything. Recovery was slow, not dramatic. No sudden moment where everything snapped back to normal. Just small changes. She started remembering conversations again, stopped asking the same question twice. Her balance improved. The fog began to lift, but something else stayed, something quieter, more permanent. There was a hesitation in her now, a pause before she trusted something, a moment where she assessed the room. Before relaxing, it wasn't obvious. Most people wouldn't notice it, but I did, because I knew it hadn't been there before. And that's when the weight of it really settled in. Not just what Clifford had done, but what it had taken from her. You can treat the body. You can monitor the damage, but trust, that's harder. We went up to the cottage that summer, just the two of us. Same place, same view. Georgian Bay stretching out in front of us like nothing had changed. We sat on the dock one evening, watching the light fade. She rested her head on my shoulder, and for a long time, neither of us said anything. At first I didn't think much of that silence, but then I realized it wasn't empty, it was complete. There were no more questions left to ask, no more pieces missing, just two people sitting in the aftermath of something they never expected to survive. After a while, she spoke, very quietly. I keep wondering when it started. I didn't answer, because I knew what she meant, not the poisoning, the intention. When did he decide to do this? She said.
Hey, was it recent? Or was it always there? That question. There's no clean answer for it. And maybe that's what makes it harder, because it forces you to reconsider everything, every memory, every conversation, every moment you thought you understood. I don't know, I said finally. And that was the truth. She nodded, didn't push it further. And we sat there a little longer, watching the last of the light disappear. Since then, I've spent a lot of time thinking about those 9 weeks. From the moment Patricia first told me she felt unwell, to the moment I opened that camera feed in a parking lot. 9 weeks, same house, same routine, same dinners across the table. And I missed it, not because I wasn't capable, but because I wasn't paying attention in the right way. I was proud of being meticulous, careful, disciplined.
I checked every calculation twice at work. I didn't miss details, not ones that mattered. But somewhere along the line, I had decided that family didn't require that same level of attention, that trust meant not questioning, that love meant relaxing, letting your guard down. And I confused that with safety. That was the biggest mistake I made, because trust is not the same as inattention, and love is not the same as looking away. If something feels off, even slightly, you don't ignore it, you don't explain it away, you follow it, you ask more questions, you check again, you get uncomfortable, because the cost of being wrong is embarrassment, but the cost of being right and doing nothing, that's something else entirely. Patricia is well now, she's back in her garden, back to her Sunday calls with Renee, but in most ways, she's the same woman I married, but there's a part of her that changed, a part I can't fix. And I would give anything to give her that version of herself back, the one that didn't hesitate, the one that didn't need to assess before trusting. But I can't. What I can do is be different, more aware, more present, the kind of man who doesn't miss what matters, because the truth is, the structures we trust the most, the ones built from years of family, history, shared lives, those are the ones we inspect the least, and sometimes that's exactly what someone is counting on. Pay attention to your home, not just the walls, not just the roof, the people inside it, because that's where the real weight is. And if you don't notice when something starts to crack, by the time it breaks, it might already be too late.